Claire, honestly, you smell like adhesive remover. My brother Tyler did not whisper it. He announced it. We were standing in the atrium of the City Art Museum, surrounded by the kind of people who owned third homes in Gstaad. Tyler, 29, and wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car, grabbed my wrist. He lifted my hand, exposing the faint, stubborn stains of bookbinder's glue under my fingernails to the nearest circle of elites. Still playing with scrap paper in that dusty shop, sis? He sneered, flashing a smile that did not reach his eyes. You really need to upgrade. Vanguard Corp is acquiring Novus AI on Monday morning. $60 billion. I am changing the world. You are just fixing old things. My parents, Susan and David, stood beside him, clutching their champagne flutes like lifelines. They did not defend me. They did not even look at me. My mother just sighed, a tiny, pitying sound that cut deeper than Tyler's words, and turned her shoulder, effectively blocking me from view. It was not the insult that broke me. It was the silence. The absolute, comfortable silence of my parents accepting my humiliation as the natural order of things. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Let's wish each other a happy 2026. May this be a year of breakthroughs for all of us. I truly appreciate your support for the channel, and I can't wait to share more stories with you this year. Arguments are messy. They leave jagged edges, like torn paper. I prefer clean cuts. I did not pull my hand away violently. I simply extracted my wrist from Tyler's grip, smoothed the sleeve of my 3-year-old dress, and turned around. The sound of their laughter followed me out the heavy glass doors, but I did not look back. The cool night air hit my face, stripping away the suffocating scent of expensive perfume and unearned entitlement. I got into my sedan, a reliable, unassuming beige box on wheels that my mother constantly begged me to park around the corner when I visited, and drove. Tears damage archival paper. They are equally useless in high-frequency trading. So I did not cry. I drove straight to the warehouse district, to a narrow street lined with flickering streetlights and businesses that the city forgot. I parked in front of the scriptorium. From the outside, it looked exactly like what my family thought it was, a dying antique book restoration shop. The windows were dusty, the sign was peeling, and the front room smelled of old paper, leather, and time. I unlocked the front door and locked it behind me. The silence here was different. It was not the silence of rejection. It was the silence of focus. I walked past the workbenches covered in gold leaf and binding tape, past the stacks of 18th century manuscripts waiting for repair. I walked all the way to the back wall, to a heavy oak bookshelf filled with encyclopedias nobody read anymore. I reached for the 3rd volume of the Britannica, tilted it slightly, and placed my eye against a small, dark knot in the wood. A red laser scanned my retina. Click. Hiss. The bookshelf did not just swing open. It dissolved into the wall, revealing a steel corridor bathed in cool blue light. I stepped through. The air changed instantly. It was filtered, temperature-controlled, smelling of ozone and electricity. This was not a shop. This was the vault. I sat down at the central console, a semicircle of 6 high-definition monitors glowing in the dark. This was the nerve center of Apex Capital. My family saw a woman who fixed old books with glue. The market saw a ghost. Apex Capital was the single most aggressive private equity firm in the hemisphere, a phantom entity that had been swallowing tech giants for 5 years. And I was not just the dusty book restorer. I was the ghost. I pulled up the file labeled Novus AI. Tyler had been bragging about buying them. He had been holding press conferences, buying watches, popping champagne, but he had not checked the back end. He had not noticed that the holding companies acquiring the voting shares all led back to one place. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I was not emotional. I was precise. Tyler thought the deal was closing Monday morning at 9. He was right about the time. He was just wrong about the buyer. I initiated the final signature sequence. The screen flashed. Acquisition pending. Authorization required. I pressed enter. It was not revenge. It was a correction. As the progress bar on the screen inched toward 100%, I leaned back in my ergonomic chair and watched the data streams flow. It was a river of numbers, a digital current worth $60 billion, and not a single person in that museum gala had a clue. People always asked me, well, the few people who knew the truth, why I did it, why hide, why let my parents look at me with that mixture of disappointment and charity? Why let Tyler treat me like a cautionary tale? The answer was simple: leverage. In nature, the most dangerous predators are not the ones roaring in the clearing. They are the ones that look like rocks, like shadows, like nothing. I had adopted the gray rock strategy not just as a defense mechanism against my family's narcissism, but as a business doctrine. If my family knew I had money, real money, the kind that buys islands, not just watches, they would not have respected me. They would have consumed me. My mother would have turned my life into her social calendar. My father would have managed my investments into the ground. And Tyler would have competed with me, sabotaged me, or sued me. By being the dusty book restorer, I became invisible. I became uninteresting. And because I was uninteresting, I was unsupervised. While Tyler was busy curating his Instagram feed and leasing cars he could not afford to impress people he did not like, I was studying market trends. While he was loud, I was learning. Invisibility is an asset. It is a form of camouflage for high-value targets. When you look like prey, the predators get sloppy. They reveal their weaknesses because they do not think they need to guard them. Tyler had spent months broadcasting his every move regarding Novus AI, assuming no one in his circle could outbid him. He never once looked down at the glue-stained hands of his sister and wondered if they were capable of writing a check that could buy his entire existence. The screen flashed green. Acquisition locked. Executing at market open. I picked up my phone. 0 missed calls. 0 texts. They were probably still at the gala, toasting to Tyler's future. I took a sip of my lukewarm tea. Let them have their champagne. I had the company. I turned off the monitors, plunging the room back into darkness, and walked back out into the dusty shop. I locked the bookshelf. I put on my coat. I drove home to my small apartment, where the rent was cheap and the silence was mine. Sunday brunch at my parents' estate was a theatrical production, and today, Tyler was the star. The patio table was laden with imported cheeses, smoked salmon, and enough pastries to feed a battalion, but nobody was eating. They were too busy worshiping. Tyler was already celebrating. He was wearing a new watch, a platinum Rolex that glinted aggressively in the morning sun. 75,000, he announced, catching me, staring at it. He did not even look up from his phone. Bought it on credit against the deal closing tomorrow. Once Novus belongs to Vanguard, 75 grand will be rounding errors. I am going to need a bigger safe. My father, David, chuckled, slicing into a melon with surgical precision. You earned it, son. Novus AI is the crown jewel. You are securing the family legacy for another 3 generations. My mother, Susan, poured herself another mimosa, her eyes misty with pride. It is just such a relief, she said, looking pointedly at me, to know that at least one of you understands the real world. Tyler is building empires. And Claire, well. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at my hands, which I had scrubbed raw to remove the glue. Claire is preserving the past. Actually, Tyler said, leaning back and putting his feet up on the empty chair next to him. I was thinking, once the acquisition goes through tomorrow morning, maybe I could help you out, Claire. Write you a small loan. You could finally fix that leaky roof at the scriptorium. Maybe buy some air freshener so it does not smell like a dead library. My mother beamed. Oh, Tyler, that is so generous. Claire, do not be stubborn. Take the help. Your brother is offering you a lifeline. I picked up my coffee cup. The porcelain was thin, delicate, and expensive. I looked at my brother, the empty suit, who thought he was a king. I looked at my parents, who measured love in stock options. They were so confident, so loud. They had no idea that the lifeline Tyler was offering was imaginary. They had no idea that the credit card bill for that watch was about to bounce, because the collateral he was banking on Novus AI was already gone. Thank you, I said, my voice steady, my pulse slow. But I think I will manage. Suit yourself, Tyler scoffed, checking his reflection in the back of a spoon. Some people just like being small. I took a sip of coffee. It was cold, but I did not grimace. I just let the bitterness sit on my tongue. I watched them toast to a victory that had already been stolen. I watched Tyler preen. I watched my parents fawn. And I said absolutely nothing. Monday morning was less than 24 hours away. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a tidal wave. At 8:59, Tyler was sitting in his corner office at Vanguard Corp., feet up on a mahogany desk that cost more than my entire shop inventory. I knew this because I had hacked his internal security feed. I was sitting in the vault, sipping lukewarm tea, watching him on monitor 3. He was checking his reflection in his phone. adjusting his tie, waiting for the call that would crown him king of the tech world. At exactly 9 o'clock, the world shifted, but it did not shift the way Tyler expected. The notification hit the Bloomberg terminals first, then the Wall Street Journal, then Twitter. Apex Capital acquires Novus AI in all-cash deal, valued at $60 billion. On my screen, I saw Tyler's phone ring. He picked it up, grinning, expecting congratulations. Then I saw his face fall. It was a slow, delicious collapse. The color drained from his cheeks. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stood up, knocking over his expensive espresso, and frantically started typing on his computer. I took another sip of tea. This moment right here, this absolute destruction of his ego, was the product of what I call the architecture of silence. For years, my family treated my silence as a defect. They thought I was quiet because I was shy, or stupid, or beaten down. They did not understand that silence is not empty. It is heavy. It is kinetic energy held in reserve. Every time Tyler mocked me and I did not respond, I was not submitting. I was storing that energy. Every time my parents pitied me and I did not correct them, I was compressing the spring. It takes immense discipline to say nothing when you hold all the cards. It takes a terrifying amount of control to let someone dig their own grave while you stand there holding the ladder they think they are climbing. I watched Tyler screaming into his phone now, throwing a paperweight across the room. He was loud. He was explosive. He was weak. My silence had built an empire. His noise had just lost one. My own phone began to buzz. It was my mother, then my father, then Tyler. I did not answer. I watched the stock tickers on monitor 1. Vanguard Corp's stock was plummeting. The market had realized that without the Novus acquisition, Vanguard was just a bloated, debt-ridden shell. Tyler wasn't just losing a deal. He was losing the narrative. I leaned forward and typed a single command into the console. It was time for the second phase. If Tyler thought losing the acquisition was the worst thing that could happen to him today, he was wrong. I wasn't just the competition. I was the creditor. Tyler was still pacing his office. His tie loosened, his face a sheen of panic. I watched on the monitor as he screamed at his general counsel over speakerphone. "Fix this, Marcus. Find a loophole. Find a breach of contract. Sue them. I don't care what it costs. Just get Novus back." I leaned back in my chair. He still did not get it. He thought this was a bidding war. He thought he had lost a prize. He did not realize he had lost the war before he even put on his boots. "Sir," the lawyer's voice crackled through the speaker, sounding thin and terrified. "We cannot sue. The deal is airtight. But that is not the problem." What could possibly be a bigger problem than losing a $60 billion acquisition? Tyler roared. "The financing, sir. To secure the capital for the Novus bid, you leveraged Vanguard's existing assets. You put up the intellectual property, the real estate, and the future revenue streams as collateral. So what? The deal fell through. The loans will just... No, sir. The loans were sold. The bank that underwrote your leverage package sold the debt notes on the secondary market this morning at 8:45. The buyer has triggered the acceleration clause. They are calling the debt. All of it. Immediately." Tyler stopped pacing. He looked at the phone as if it had turned into a snake. "Who bought the debt?" "Apex Capital." I smiled. It was a cold, small smile. This was the secondary twist, the trapdoor beneath the trapdoor. Tyler had been so obsessed with looking rich that he had made himself vulnerable. To fund his lifestyle and his ego-driven acquisitions, he had borrowed heavily. And in the world of high finance, debt is a leash. If you own the debt, you own the dog. "They own us?" Tyler whispered. "Basically, technically, sir, they are our primary creditor. If we do not pay the full balance of $40 billion by close of business, they can seize Vanguard's assets. They can liquidate us. Or they can take control of the board." Tyler sank into his leather chair. He looked small. The $75,000 watch on his wrist suddenly looked like a handcuff. "Get Mom and Dad on the phone," he croaked. "Already done, sir. They are on line 2. And, sir, a courier just arrived in the lobby, hand-delivered from the Zenith Spire." "From Apex?" "Yes, it is a summons. The CEO of Apex Capital expects you, your board members, that means your parents and your legal counsel at their headquarters in 1 hour. Top floor." Tyler stared at the ceiling tiles as if they held the answers. On the monitor, his panic was high definition. He was running through every enemy he had ever made, every bridge he had ever burned. He never once thought of the sister he had left at the museum. I closed the connection to his office feed. I stood up and smoothed my skirt. I walked out of the vault, the steel door hissing shut behind me, and returned to the dusty, glue-scented air of the scriptorium. I picked up my bag. I had a meeting to get to, and for the first time in my life, I was not going to be early. I was going to make them wait. The elevator ride to the top of the Zenith Spire takes exactly 45 seconds. I know this because I timed it when I bought the building. For my family, standing in that glass capsule rocketing toward the clouds, I imagine it felt like an eternity. I was waiting for them in the boardroom. It is a fortress of glass and steel, suspended 1,000 feet above the city. I sat at the head of the obsidian table, my chair turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker on in the twilight. I wasn't wearing my shop apron. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit, sharp enough to cut glass. The doors hissed open. I heard their footsteps hesitant, shuffling, the footsteps of people walking to the gallows. "Hello, Tyler," I said, my back still turned. "Please, sit." "Who are you?" Tyler's voice was thin, stripped of all its usual bluster. "Where is the CEO? You are looking at her." I swiveled the chair. The sound that escaped my mother's throat was not a word. It was a gasp, a physical rejection of reality. They stared at me. They looked at my face, then at the suit, then at the office that screamed absolute, terrifying power. They tried to reconcile the dusty book restorer they had pitied with the titan holding their lives in her hands. The cognitive dissonance was almost audible. "Claire," my father whispered. "But the shop. The shop is where I go to think, Dad. This," I gestured to the skyline, "is where I work." Tyler stepped forward, his face flushed. "This is a joke. You fixed a Bible for Grandma last Christmas. You don't have $60 billion. I didn't argue. I simply slid a black folder across the polished table. "Open it." He opened it. Inside was the deed to the Zenith Spire, the acquisition papers for Novus AI, and the transfer of ownership for Vanguard Corp's debt. "I own the building you are standing in," I said, my voice calm and low. "I own the company you tried to buy, and as of this morning, I own the debt that keeps your company alive. I am not your sister right now, Tyler. I am your boss." Tyler collapsed into the nearest chair. He looked at the papers, then up at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Are you going to fire me? Are you going to liquidate Vanguard?" "I should," I said. "You are reckless. You are vain. You leverage assets you don't have to buy things. You don't need to impress people who don't care. You are a liability." My mother started to cry. "Claire, please. He's your brother." "I know," I said, "which is why I am not going to destroy him." I stood up and walked to the window. This was the moment, the kingmaker moment. "I don't want to be on the cover of Forbes, Tyler. I don't want the galas. I don't want the interviews. That is the trap of the crown. The person wearing the crown is a target. The person standing behind the throne, that is where the real power lives." I turned back to them. "I am offering you a partnership. Vanguard remains the public face. You keep your title, you keep your office, you keep your watches, but Apex Capital, meaning me, controls the board. I approve every acquisition. I vet every contract. I control the money. You get the glory, Tyler. I get the control." Tyler stared at me. He realized what I was offering. It was a golden cage. He could keep his status, his ego, his identity, but only if he submitted to my authority. "Why?" he asked. "Because you have good bones," I said, echoing the words bookbinders use for damaged antiques. "You have charisma. You have drive. You just lack a spine. I can provide the spine." I pushed a pen toward him. "Sign the restructuring agreement, or I call the debt, and Vanguard ceases to exist by 5 o'clock. He didn't hesitate. He signed. My parents watched, silent, shrinking in their seats. They finally understood. They had spent 30 years worshipping the noise, never realizing that the signal was coming from the other room. I didn't stay for the pleasantries. I left them with my legal team and took the private elevator down to the garage. I drove back to the warehouse district, back to the narrow street and the flickering light. I unlocked the door to the scriptorium. The smell hit me: old paper, leather, dust. It was the smell of patience. I took off my blazer. I rolled up my sleeves. I walked over to my workbench, where a spine-broken 19th century atlas was waiting for repair. I picked up my brush and dipped it into the pot of warm, amber glue. Tyler had his crown. I had my empire. and looking down at my hands, strong and steady and stained with the tools of my trade, I knew which one was real. If you've ever had to hide your true strength just to survive, share this story. And tell me in the comments, would you have offered the partnership or destroyed him completely? I read every single one,